Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've interviewed a couple of different people from the world of fashion, and all of them have recommended that I speak with the gentleman I want to introduce you to tonight. This is Roger Gingerich. He is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, CANIFFF, one of the 47 fashion film festivals across the globe, and the only fashion film festival in Canada. With over 35 years of various roles in the fashion industry, Roger proudly works behind the scenes. He's going to tell us a little bit about that, I think. He served for 7 seasons on the board of directors for Canadian Fashion Group, which won the biggest fashion weeks in Canada, Toronto Men's and Women's Fashion Week, as well as 8 years on the board of directors of Fashion Group International Toronto, 3 of those years as the regional director. He was also recently appointed to the board of directors of the Commonwealth Fashion Council in London, England, representing Canada. The media has dubbed him as the Fashion Network Whisperer, which he loves, as it's not about him, but about connecting incredible people to collaborate together. Roger, welcome to my show. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. And Brian, I have to do a quick thank you to you for really highlighting a lot of the fashion industry lately with the great interview you had recently with Vicky Milner with Kappa, Jordan Stewart with RVNG, which I absolutely adore, and Ross Meyer with namesake Ross Meyer. Is the fashion industry, more than ever needs shout-outs. They need attention. They need, platforms like yourself talking about them. So I have to thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it was a pleasure to do so. Roger, is there a future for fashion and designers and manufacturers in Toronto and in Canada? Because that's what the show was about, was could they survive, both with COVID-19, but also long-term with cheap stuff from China, et cetera? What do you think? What's the future?
Yeah, I mean, what's going on in Toronto is no different than what's going on in Paris or in London or in Milan, New York. 2005, when worldwide textile quotas were abolished, was really the start of the decline of manufacturing in North America. And slowly over the last, I'm going to say 5 years, that's been coming back, but it's been coming back slowly. And it's no longer just making, and it's just a simple example, but making a fleece jacket. Now it's Canada Goose. It's these luxury brands that are making premium pieces. The labor rates are obviously a little bit higher. So to offset that, you produce luxury garments. And so that industry as a whole is coming back. It's never going to come back to, the pre-levels of where it was at. And for a reason. We're in a global economy. I've got $50 in my pocket and I need a pair of shoes. I want the biggest bang for my buck. But that's a global issue right now.
When I spoke with Jordan Stewart of RVNG, she was describing an interest in what she called slow fashion. What's slow fashion?
Slow fashion is actually, if you take 3 circles and put them together, the intersection point is what slow fashion is. So it's really ethical fashion, which is making sure it's no animals were harmed, no children were used in the making of it. Eco fashion, where how much water denim is taking a bad rap, right, and properly so, is how much water is being used, on polluting the earth to create a pair of denim, along with the key aspect, which is lasting fashion. I came from a German upbringing where my parents bought me a piece of clothing and it was going to last at least for a year. And if I ripped it, I tore it, we sewed it. It was repaired. It went to a seamstress. My mom would sew it. But that intersection point, I'll backtrack. We don't buy lasting fashion as much anymore. That needs to come back. And that's really this trend of slow fashion, is that intersection point of the 3. But again, the key aspect, in my opinion, is lasting fashion. Buying a piece that you're going to have, God forbid, for 10 years in your wardrobe, that critical, sweater. I'm embarrassed to say I've had this sweater for probably 8 years. I love this sweater. If I burst a seam, I get it repaired. We don't repair our clothing anymore.
So you probably actually do know the brand, but there's a famous brand in England called Crombie, and obviously, given my name, I was attracted to it. It's not sold in Canada, but it's sold in the UK and Scotland and France and Europe, etc. And it was actually around 200 years ago, and built coats that clothed the British Empire Army in India. And I know about 15, 20 years ago, I bought a Crombie coat. and I wore it last night. So there are some things that because of the brand, because of the great workmanship, it's something you want to last and wear forever.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, congrats on having a great namesake on that. Your radio listeners, can't see you right now, but you're incredibly stylish right now.
I had to wear a jacket for you with a pocket square and cufflinks.
And the cufflinks.
Oh, you're wearing cufflinks too. Fantastic. Roger, you are CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival. What is that?
Proudly, Canadian International Fashion Film Festival. We also go by the acronym CANIFFF. There's 47 fashion film festivals in the world. We are the only one in Canada. They started 12 years ago in Germany and in Paris, and it was more of a way for designers to start to showcase their brand in a non-traditional format, where magazines have been around for decades upon decades. The fashion shows have been around, but at the end of the day, it's about storytelling. You told a great story with Crombie. I'm now intrigued on the history and the heritage of the brand. That's what a fashion film is. I need to leave, a 1 to a 5 minute, short fashion film, knowing the ethos of that brand. What is that signature piece? What is their story? You basically gave it to me in a few seconds on the heritage of Crombie, and wow, I'm kind of intrigued. I've got this visual of what this jacket looks like. And that's what fashion films are now doing across the world, are being used by designers and brands on storytelling, on showcasing how cool our brand is, what's our demographic. And fashion films as a genre have actually morphed into a genre of film that coffee companies are using to sell their coffee beans. Automotive companies are using it to sell their cars. Is this genre where, at the end of the day, fashion is the lead character or plays a supporting role. In a nutshell, that is really the definition of a fashion film.
Roger, how do I pronounce your last name?
My grandmother had a family meeting years ago before she passed on everybody in our family saying it differently. Gingerich, Ginrich, Gunrich, there's a number of pronunciations. There's no wrong way.
We're chatting tonight with Roger Gingrich. That's how I'll pronounce it. Is that all right?
Perfect.
Who is the president and CEO of the Canadian National Fashion Film Festival. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more and hear about Roger's illustrious career in fashion. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Tonight, we're talking fashion with Roger Gingerich. He is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, known as CANIFFF. It's one of 47 fashion film festivals around the world, which he just described. But Roger's got an interesting career because he's been in the business, the fashion business, for 35 years in various different roles. And I want to hear about some of those. Roger, how'd you get your start in fashion?
Was actually in high school in Edmonton. My family, we grew up in Stratford, Ontario. Family moved to Edmonton when I was 10. In high school, I worked for a sports repair shop, which had NHL, CFL contracts on repairing hockey gloves, repumping of hockey gloves, side stitching of skates. And when I had graduated high school, the business went out of business, and Edmonton Oilers, Edmonton Eskimos, had called me at home and said, Roger, you start a business, we'll support you. So I got a family loan for a few very expensive sewing machines. My rent on 118th Avenue in Edmonton and 65th, just down from Northlands Coliseum, which had changed name since then, was $150 a month. And proceeded to run my own business for 6 years, sewing and pattern making. Did Wayne Gretzky's equipment personally for many, many years. Fascinating time to be in Edmonton during the Edmonton Oilers reign. But I learned sewing and pattern making, and which is really the gist of any fashion business. What I lacked was the business and how to charge, and moved to Vancouver, and then it come to Toronto in 2000, and had gotten a little bit more of a business background on, what is margin? God forbid I make a profit on selling my services or what have you. So yeah, that's a bit of a snapshot, my background.
Fascinating that you got your start in hockey equipment.
And honestly, I can't skate if my life depended on it. I have no ankles. I I'm embarrassed to be a Canadian and admit that I can't skate. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's understanding the construction of a garment. You know, whether it's a great blazer that you're wearing, there's a lot of components to put that blazer together. No different than, you know, a pair of hockey skates where it's got a lining. Gretzky had one foot smaller than the other and always had to have a lamb skin liner put from within. At the time he was with Jofa under contract with the gloves, and his gloves would come right from the factory with Jofa over every rib, over every inch of the glove. And it said he looked like a Christmas tree. And it went back to the shop with a bottle of varnish and it all came off except for the embroidery. And but you learned, you know, customers' desires, customers' wants, customers', you know, needs, and at the end of the day, the consumer wins. You know, whether you're a massive retailer with thousands of units in stock, at the end of the day, it appeals to that one consumer on if it fits their fancy or not.
With COVID-19, we're all stuck at home, and people are, you know, bragging about wearing sweats or yoga clothes or whatnot all day long. I put my jacket on because I'm interviewing, you know, such an icon in the fashion business in Canada as you. Do you think that jackets, gowns, formal dress is going to come back? Is there any future?
Wow, that's the $1 million question globally right now on events, on the know thy audience, where if we're opened up to 50 people, to 100 people, to, you know, you take CANIFFF, you know, 650 people, it's the annual fashion gala for Canada every year. Those gowns are unbelievable, let alone the jewelry and the shoes and all the accessories that go with it. You know, and unfortunately, it's going to be a few years. It's going to be baby steps. You know, that 650 person gala is not happening this year. And it's going to be maybe half of that for next year. And that's just not just in Canada. Italy, France, England, Australia, they're all going to have their reopening protocols. And no different than, you know, the blazer for men, the suit, the dressed up suit. This is going to be interesting to see this shift of this. Number one, you know, there's a number of reports saying productivity for so many, I'll say Bay Street, but downtown firms across the world, productivity is on the rise. So when this is all over, our company is going to be going, do I really need to be dropping 50, 100 grand a month to have all my staff in one space? I'm paying insurance, I'm paying cleaners, I'm paying electricity, and my productivity is better having them at home. So the sale of that, you know, $1,000 suit or what have you really being needed anymore is going to be on the decline for a while. So the designers have to shift. Is it loungewear? Loungewear, without question, is on the rise. We want to be comfortable, but we still want to be professional. You know, as we're all doing Zoom talks, and from the waist up, we better look professional. But that suit jacket and that gown, unfortunately, is going to be in the closet for a while.
I feel different when I wear a jacket. And a shirt versus a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, and particularly, you know, cufflinks, and the old adage about, you know, clothes make the man. Is that now bygone?
No, it's still there. It's you know, I knew I was going to be interviewing you. You're a very well-known show. Now I'm making sure I'm wearing a nice red or white, you know, dress shirt. I've got my pink cufflinks on, which I love my cufflinks. You know, it's an empowering moment. It's feeling good about yourself. You know, no different than a fitted suit, regardless of your body type. Having a nice fitted Indochino suit, you know, walking around with a pair of Park shoes. I mean, two proudly Canadian brands. You know, there's something that makes a guy feel good about just dressing up and just knowing that they look good.
In 1920 or in the 1920s, when the Spanish flu was over, we had the Roaring Twenties, and we had Flapper Girls and Great Gatsby and big parties and speakeasies, and the Roaring Twenties were, you know, a time of almost excess partying and glamour, etc. Do you think we might have such a, you know, a pendulum switch from loungewear to nonstop events and parties?
It's a great apropos comment, because I never really put the Roaring Twenties to the 2020 Roaring 20s, 100%. Yeah, I get dressed up to go grocery shopping, even though I got a mask on. Tanya DeBellis, designer, had sent me a 7 designer masks, and one basically for every day of the week. I match my designer mask to the outfit that I'm wearing when I go to my metro here in Stouffville. So let alone me getting dressed up to metro. Boy, wait till that first event comes out. I'm going nonstop on what I'm getting dressed up with. So the industry is itching to get out, to have that human connection. I mean, let's be honest, business is all about handshakes and eyeballs, and getting in that personal greeting of somebody, the ambiance of a room, and looking good, and knowing that George Pimentel or Ryan Embry are there to snap a photo for Hello Magazine or for Wire Image. That's what we Canadians and the world live for, is to be recognized and to be noticed. So yeah, without question, when the events come back, they are going to be a lot more focused. I'll say that. I was interviewed a while ago on, are the days gone, where fashion shows where you've got, 600-700 people in a room just to fill a room, where, with government restrictions and mandates where you're allowed 50 to 100 to 200, I will guarantee you those 50 to 200 people are incredibly focused clienteles. I live by the mantra, know thy audience. So it's gone are the days of having, your neighbor and your family just to fill seats. It is, I only have 50 seats to fill, and I better make sure that those 50 people are very relevant to my event or to my cause.
Now, you're CEO of the fashion film industry. Next week, I understand, is New York Fashion Week. And from what I understand is people are not doing this live on Zoom. They're actually doing pre-recorded films. So this is sort of your business, isn't it?
Yeah, runways are not actually fashion films. Runways are more to showcase an entire collection in a different formats. Jacquemus in France recently did one through a wheat field during COVID, and this wheat field, it was literally paved right through this massive wheat field, and he had his buyers, clientele, and media. I think they were like 10 feet apart from each other. But these fashion shows that are going to be taking place in New York, yeah, they're pre-recorded, but the audience is just going to be a little bit different. You're missing that ambiance. You're missing that after party where really the network happens. You don't get the oohs and the ahs. I kind of always go by this 80-20 rule, and I've seen my fair share of fashion weeks where, let's be honest, 20% of it is sometimes for show, but it sets the tone, it sets the theme. And really what the media and the buyers, and quite frankly, the designers waiting for, is that moment, or the oohs from the crowd. They know that's the piece that struck the fancy with the crowd at that season. You don't get that in a
How are you going to try to, if you're advising some of these firms that are going to be exhibiting next week at New York Fashion Week online, pre-recorded, how would you be suggesting to them they try to get those oohs and ahs?
Yeah, you reduce your collection. Instead of having, and I'm just making up numbers, 25, 50 looks, have 10 or 20 key focused looks. You don't have time to play around with experimenting on who the winners are and who the non-winners are. You got to know who your clientele market is, and it's going to be a limited buy this year, so you've got to be a lot more focused anyway. And those oohs and the ahs you're not going to get unless you set up a good chat room. You use some sort of engagement tools where it's polling off to the side where, what's your favorite, to win a $2,000 wardrobe. Engage your audience to not only watch over here, but jump on your Zoom or other platforms, and it's a poll, and engage back with that designer.
What else is happening globally in fashion? We've got this loungewear, we've got the online fashion shows. What else is happening?
Well, I could dive into the Commonwealth Fashion Council, and one of the initiatives with the Commonwealth Fashion Council is, retail taking such a beating right now. How do you re-engage? Online shopping is not going to go away, but retail is still the touch and the feel, the having a salesperson tell you the hidden little secrets about the designer or, the product itself. And how is retail going to re-engage? And that's, if not, if not the biggest issue right now globally. I mean, shopping malls here in Ontario are just outright closed, but when they reopen again, and those that have survived, how are they going to re-engage with that consumer to get them off of their computer or their tablet to actually come into the store to have that, in-store experience? Obviously, the impulse buy is far greater when you're in the store and you've tried it on, it's got the perfect fit. You don't have to worry about returning it. And again, I talk a lot about engagement. You've got to engage with that consumer. So one of the things the Commonwealth Fashion Council is in the works on is this type of an engagement across the Commonwealth. How do we promote, across the 54 countries of the Commonwealth, how do you promote, the African designers along with the Indian designers and from Singapore and Australia, New Zealand and London and Canada. And one of the actual concepts and templates we're playing with, we're actually going to be launching across the Commonwealth here in Toronto. We're hoping to do it this year. And it's bringing the art across the Commonwealth, it's bringing the cultures across the Commonwealth and engaging with these evening parties, whether it's government NGOs, whether it's celebrities, whether it's a trend forecasting presentation, whatever have you. How do you re-engage somebody to come out to your store on Queen West or into a shopping mall?
That's fascinating. And I encourage you in that regard. I'd love to be part of it. I was a keynote speaker at a Mississauga Fashion Week event a couple of years ago, which really was trying to focus on the diversity of fashion by different people that were in Mississauga. And it was interesting because you had Western clothes, but then you also had clothes from both, China, Japan, as well as India and Pakistan, as well as Africa, as well as South America. And it was really quite interesting seeing the merger of different cultures and Western fashion.
Yeah. Well, and Mississauga, no different than Toronto, has such a diverse culture on showcasing it. And her name escapes me at the top of my mind, but yeah, she's done very well with that fashion week on showcasing a number of designers that may not have the opportunity for a larger platform, but to still get out there and invite their consumer base and whatever have you. And it's even, my years with Toronto Men's and Toronto Women's Fashion Week, same scenario. It was designers from the Philippines, it was from Montreal, from all across Canada, but culturally as well, from China, from Africa. And one of the unique things about here in Toronto, I'm going to say it was probably 2015, we had around 20 fashion weeks in the Toronto area. There was Indigenous Fashion Week. There was actually two Indigenous Fashion Weeks. There was African Fashion Week. There was Italian Fashion Week. There was a Men's Fashion Week. There was Chinese Fashion Week. There was a Philippine Fashion Week. It went on and on. So it sometimes it gets a bit too diluted where the media and the buyers are, I only have so much time. What do I attend? And it boils down to know thy audience. Who's my demographic?
I enjoyed having all the different diversity, all the different cultures present at the one evening.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic platform. It's tough to curate that because you're always going to leave out somebody. But if that is your focus, then 100%, it's a brilliant way to do it.
Roger, you used an interesting word. You said curate. Is fashion art?
100%. I saw you had asked a previous guest that. I'm going to take some flack on this comment, but I personally believe fashion was art before art was an art, in that clothing was, let's be honest, it started to be purely functional, kept you warm, kept you protected. Over time, it then became, hey, I've got a bit of a figure, I'm going to show it off. Or, hey, I don't have a figure, I don't want to show it off. So fashion then became about matching a silhouette. Then it became about showcasing my wealth over your wealth. So I'm going to add jewels to mine. I'm going to showcase some lace or what have you. So the art came into it centuries ago, where literally you could, no different than a piece of art, you could see somebody's attire and know their social status. You could know that, wow, that was just beautifully put together. The 1800s were an incredible time for fashion and aristocracy, and the colors and the palettes and they were literally couture bespoke pieces at that time. 1000% was it art.
I got to tell you, I've been watching this series on Netflix. I think it's Bridgerton or something like that, from, I guess, that era, maybe a little bit before. And I'm a little bit envious of some of the jackets that the men got to wear.
I feel sorry for the women. Honestly, those corsets do not look comfortable. My wife just finished watching that series. But the guys, I mean, those ascots and the blazers, I mean, oh my, just to get a hand. I mean, there's no events that I'd be normal walking into with one of those getups, but unbelievable attire.
We're chatting tonight with Roger Gingerich, who is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, one of 47 fashion film festivals around the world. We're talking about fashion, the future of fashion. We're going to take a break and come back more with Roger in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, we're back talking fashion on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour with Roger Gingerich, who is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, CANIFFF, CANIFFF, for any of those that you want to check him out and follow him. He's been in the fashion business for 35 years, got his start in dressing NHL hockey players, including Wayne Gretzky back in Edmonton, I guess 1985, a bunch of years ago. Roger, tell us a little bit about your career. So started with hockey and then what?
Transitioned, moved to, I actually took a brief break and did furniture and automotive upholstery. I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. And to this day, I'm still fascinated with furniture upholstery. And one of my best restorations ever working for a company was a Jaguar E-Type car and a full interior restoration. Absolutely loved it. From there, I went to Vancouver, worked for a small company at the time called Storm Tech. Anybody in corporate Canada probably owns a Storm Tech jacket.
I've got one, if not several.
So Storm Tech started with them in, let me just think here, 1996. And I was the 8th employee. We were, doing, I'm going to guess, around 50 million a year in sales. And Storm Tech was one of these brilliant brands that started breaking barriers where there was so many iconic players in promotional apparel. And the owner of Storm Tech, Blake Annable, had really liked fashion and had inspiration from so many different brands, and decided to, no, we're going to charge, $100, $200 for this jacket, $300, $400. And the promotional industry was like, dude, there's no way corporate Canada can afford that kind of a price point for a jacket. He did it anyway, couldn't keep it in stock. Every shipment we would get in, couldn't keep it in stock. Largest deal I had ever done, I was overseeing Eastern Canada at the time, was 33,000 jackets for CN Rail, who at the time had bought Illinois Central. And we had 6 weeks to pull this off with 2 embroidered logos on it. Spent over $100,000 in airfare out of Surabaya, Indonesia, to bring them into Montreal on time. But it just really showed, there's the fashion industry, and then there's literally the mass market, aside from, the retail of the world, but this world of promotional, which is absolutely fascinating, large volumes, but want to look stylish as well. From then, recruited to Toronto to develop an outerwear collection under the label Celsius, which I had absolutely loved the name. Surprisingly, nobody had a trademark. We expunged a few in Europe. And then in 2003, I had started my own agency, being more of a product-based agency, overseeing Sun Ice, if you remember Sun Ice at the time, proud Canadian brand out of Calgary at the time. It was the 1988 Olympics. Fossil watches, Holiday Group, which had the license for Roots bags, Travel Pro. And then about 5-6 years ago, I transitioned more as a fashion broker. And a fashion broker was, I wish I could take the credit for the name, but Lauren Sheriffs, who, again, proudly a Mississauga girl, runs one of Canada's largest social media agencies called Two Social, was working for me at the time. And we would have these monthly meetings, and I'd say, who are we? And it's good to challenge yourself every now and then. And as an agency, sometimes the obvious is right in front of you. And she said, well, Roger, you're a fashion broker, and you need to learn how to monetize it. So I was consulting to the film industry on fashion players. I was luxury clearance on brands that, they don't throw out their brand. They don't put it on sale. Raj, how do we clear this product? And a number of other consulting. So I literally transitioned my agency to what it is today, aside from my day jobs on CANIFFF, is as a fashion broker on consulting to a number of industries, networking, collaborating with absolutely brilliant minds. I take a lot of pride in being behind the scenes, because one of my mentors had once said, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So it's a matter of how do you pick out those key people, put them together, and just watch the magic flow. And that's part of being a broker, where I'll sit down, and whether it's a student out of Humber, where I teach part-time, graduating, looking to get into the industry, or a seasoned veteran looking for that next opportunity. The beauty of being a fashion broker and working in a film industry is, hey, there's this new film coming up. This is a great opportunity for you to consult. You're a stylist, whatever have you. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit of my background and how I've switched and changed with the times.
Sounds like you've pivoted on numerous occasions. Where do you think the opportunities are in fashion coming out of COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, you're asking that $1 million question right now that the whole world wants to know. Is I'll be honest, they're still somewhat of an unknown. The reality is, clothing is one of those essentials of life. So that aside, we also want to look good in our clothing as well. Being incredibly focused on knowing who your demographic is, gone are the days of the shotgun and just going after what sticks, but actually knowing who your audience is and designing for that audience. No longer doing this massive volumes of inventory, but being really focused. Just watch when you're not going to see as many brands on sale anymore, is because they haven't overbought. That retailer hasn't overbought. That designer or brand hasn't overproduced. So if you want something, you better buy it, because it ain't going on sale. When there's right now, there's a supply problem in the world, and it's slowly catching up to us. So what are the opportunities in fashion? It is going to be demographic profiling, really understanding who your client is. That hybrid, we're now forced to buy online, but that in-person shopping is coming back. It's going to come back different. What does that new hybrid model look like? I professor at Humber College, and very much a polytechnical school. These students are trained to hit the ground running, and they are, some brilliant 23-year-old mind is no different than some 60-year-old seasoned veteran in this industry that is looking possibly for that same job. But now you've got this 23, 24-year-old that is incredibly savvy on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. Digital content is where it's at. One of the beauties of fashion film is we're digital content. What other forms of digital content are out there? How are we going to get to Brian with that extra $1,000 he's got and he wants to go out shopping? I want Brian's $1,000 buy. And it's that digital content that's going to resonate with you. What did you see? Who inspired you? What page do you follow? What guy do you look to for inspiration? At the end of the day, that's what it's going to boil down to is how focused are we on our consumer?
Is retail going to come back? Designers have got to be hurting big time with what's happened with retail, and not just retail in malls, but like retail on King West and Queen West and Main Streets in all our towns. They're all closed.
I saw a report a while ago. There's been over 10,000 restaurants permanently closed in Canada so far. Restaurants are definitely one genre. One thing about the fashion industry, those retailers, that were smart 5 years ago, that shift, COVID aside, that shift was already happening, where people were literally shopping with their phones to take pictures of codes, UP codes, and then checking to see where they can find it cheaper online. They would try on their fit in a store. Oh, I'm a medium, great. I'm going to buy a medium online wherever I can get it. What is going to come back stronger, or what needs to come back stronger, is that engagement, that consumer experience. It's one of the things of, see on my wall, I'll point right here. There's many pictures of Harry Rosen. I absolutely adore that man. Harry Rosen is a Canadian icon. And one of the things about his retail locations has always been about the customer experience. They were slow to go online because they want to drive the traffic in store. Hey, Mr. Gingerich, how are you today? You're looking fine. Are you growing a bit of hair back there, sir? What can we get you today? I know last time that you were a 44 regular. It's that customer experience you do not get when you're online.
I've always been amazed with that. I used to go to a menswear store in Etobicoke, Bill Miles, and he would remember the suit I bought a decade ago.
That is engagement. That is good customer stewardship at a retail level that will never, ever go away. Sadly, a lot of our retailers were about pushing inventory. To get those margins up, they had to buy in larger bulk, and it wasn't about the consumer experience. It was about the second it landed on the store floor, or the floor, it was on sale. It was about moving merchandise. It wasn't about the consumer experience. That consumer experience needs to come back. And it's going to be a slow go. The rents are already where they're at. I don't see the rents on Queen West or King West or Bloor coming down anytime soon. And that will hurt, the landlords. So those that actually own their buildings are actually doing quite well because they can weather the storm. But it's a global issue. It's an issue in Paris. It's Savile Row. It's an issue. It's on Fifth Avenue. It's an issue. It's not only to Toronto.
You're CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival. How is your festival different than other film festivals, fashion film festivals around the world?
Ours is, before we acquired the festival last year, 6 years this one's been running. It was based by three ladies in Calgary that had started it. And I was consulting to them with sponsorships, with brand engagements, whatever have you. So I actually started my learning in fashion film festivals, many years ago. And then we had made the decision to acquire it last year and bring it here to Toronto. The number of fashion film festivals around the world, and there's some absolutely brilliant ones. Some are focused very heavy on the film industry, and some are very heavily focused on the fashion industry and networking within the fashion industry. Where CANIFFF is different is my background as a fashion broker is understanding the business of both the fashion and the film. And you'll see in one of my pictures here, I'm going to point to him on my wall of pictures, and is my dear friend Hank Vanderkolk, who was the founder of TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. Was Dusty Cole, Bill Marshall, Hank Vanderkolk, and sadly the two had passed away, and Hank Vanderkolk is surviving. But one of the key aspects that Hank had told me was, Roger, there's this consumer component to TIFF that everybody, we're shutting down King West and people are lined up to see Brad Pitt and whatever have you, but people don't understand the business of film that goes on during TIFF. Where you'll take, the Thompson Hotel, which I know is going through a rebranding, or the Shangri-La Hotel, which has an absolutely beautiful theater. Well, these private theaters are booked during TIFF. You're going to have in these, 12-seat theaters, you're going to have Brad Pitt, you're going to have a director, a producer, you're going to have a financier. They're going to go through watching a 20-minute clip on the idea or a pilot for this next movie. Guys, let's go for lunch. And they sign a $200 million deal. That's the business that goes on during TIFF. That's the inspiration behind CANIFFF as well. Is how do we bring the filmmakers to Toronto from around the world? This past year, we had 37 countries submitting films, 160 films, which we were ecstatic with during a COVID year. But how do you bring those filmmakers, the directors of photography, the producers, the financiers, the costume designers, along with the fashion industry and the stylists and the PR people as well, the photographers, the designers? I mean, you've easily got, 30, 40 career paths in both fashion and film all together during the festival, talking about, what are the new genres in 3D? What are the new genres in storytelling, in artificial, or in animation? We had Offset was a film submitted last year by a brilliant Italian gentleman who had the entire short was done. This fashion film was done in 3-dimensional, and it looked so real. And I actually reached out to him, and I did a CANIFFF chat on Instagram Live. It turns out he's here in Toronto. Toronto's got one of the best animation studios in the world. And I'm actually thinking I'm having this chat with him, and he's in Italy, and he's in downtown Toronto working for a major studio. That excites me to no level on literally bringing the two together. So that's really the difference of CANIFFF is we are the business of film and the business of fashion, and where they intersect together.
If people are interested in learning more about CANIFFF, how do they do that?
Our website, caniff.com, and that's CAN for CAN, I for international, and then 3 Fs, Fashion Film Festival, and our Instagram at caniff_CA.
We're chatting tonight with Roger Gingerich, who is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, CANIFFF. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments with Roger about fashion in the future in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brian Crombie here with Roger Gingerich, who is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival, or CAN, C-A-N, and 3S, CANIFFF for short. And he's got a website that you can check out if you want to check out the Canadian International Film Festival, Fashion Film Festival. Roger, you're a professor at Humber, and you teach our young students about fashion in the future. Is it a good business to get involved in? And what do you tell them?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, many industries right now are graduating students and entering a different environment. And, I'm humbled, to be a professor this season with Humber. I've sat on their program advisory committee for a number of years, and absolutely brilliant polytechnical school with so many other divisions, with cosmetology and also their arts and the films, where they collaborate so well. So the beauty of that school is the students are not just coming out all excited, understanding fashion, but they've made a lot of friends within a polytechnical school that are well versed in so many other trades and disciplines that they will use in this business of fashion. So the careers coming out for my graduating class, which I'm ecstatic at, some absolutely brilliant creative minds, and in a graduating semester, it's more we're going through a fashion show production show, and are we shooting indoors? How many people are allowed? Is there no people allowed? Are we pre-recording it? So they're already being prepared for careers in the outside world. But what are those careers going to be? They're going to be incredibly focused on what the product is, how are we going to market, and how do you get to that consumer or to that buyer? It's a challenging world for them, without question.
You've been involved in numerous of these different fashion organizations, Fashion International Group, CANIFFF, et cetera. It sounds like networking, building community is one of your principles. Why?
I absolutely love networking. And it's a matter of putting just absolutely brilliant people. It is like that, these stories you read of, I was reading one a while ago on, I think it was 1947 in some bus, and this guy thought his wife had died during the war, and met her through a mutual, or somebody he had met on a bus on a random meet. And that's really networking at the end of the day, where you've got these brilliant people that just are so aligned and need to meet. And if I have one simple gift in life, it's knowing some brilliance in people and seeing where their skill set is needed when somebody else's brilliant skill set, but lacking, on that connectivity. None of us are brilliant in any one, full aspect. I liken myself to a jack of all trade, master of none, and I definitely don't know it all, and love being surrounded with people that have a better mind, than I do. I'm not a detail-orientated person. My wife is, and I'm very thankful for that. And it's no different than networking. It's a matter of being able to recognize some brilliant talents, and you guys need to meet. Just let the magic happen, let the collaborations happen, and that excites me to no end. Is seeing so much brilliance in this country. I interviewed Joe Mimran years ago on, why Canada and the beauty of Canada. And one of the things he stuck with me. And he had said, we're too humble to a fault sometimes, where we don't beat our chest and say, look how great we are, because we're Canadian. We downplay how great we are, but we shouldn't. The world loves Canada. I hear it nonstop when I travel. It's, the old adage of the Canadian pin on your backpack. It is, I've heard stories of Americans and other countries literally putting Canadian pins on their backpack. They're treated differently. How the world sees us from a creative standpoint. We're in the heart of it all right here in Toronto. I believe there's 170 different languages in the greater Toronto area alone. The world sees that. The world sees how Toronto understands the world of fashion and how we're not just stuck with black, blues, and grays. There's color in our wardrobe. We have very much a Caribbean-inspired demographic, an Asian-inspired demographic, an Eastern Europe-inspired demographic, a European-inspired demographic. And that is just such a beautiful melting pot.
Can you have Canadian fashion? You think about, New York or Italy. I can think about their great fashion. But other than, special types of coats or, the Hudson's Bay blanket, can there be true Canadian fashion?
Brian, let's revisit that question in about 400 years, where literally some of these countries have had centuries to develop, their DNA on what is their look. And will Canada ever have that signature piece? I leave that out there for the listeners to challenge me on. Hudson Bay, let's be honest, 400 plus year company, the points blanket is a brilliant example. So thank you for bringing that up. When we were launching both Toronto Men's and Toronto Women's Fashion Week, we used the hashtag and the tagline, the outerwear capital of the world. I did a research project for a consulting client last year, and of the top 10 most recognized outerwear jackets in the world, 3 are Canadian.
Really? That's interesting.
It's how the world looks at Canada. They understand cold. They want to look stylish. And these aren't they're utilitarian, but they are fashionable jackets. So it's if you want a Canadian identity, whether we want it or not, the world recognizes premium Canadian outerwear garments.
If you're given the concluding address to your Humber students about whether they should get involved in fashion in the future, what's your message?
1,000%. It's an exciting industry that is going to use up every one of your emotions, talents, your hidden creativity, and you're going to learn community. Community is our theme this year with CANIFFF, and it's very apropos in that we need each other. We need each other watching out for each other. We need that support structure on our local restaurants, our local designers, and it's one of the things that students. I'm not sure that we were in a society of fend for yourself and just worry about me, myself, and I. Those days are over. Community in a graduating class, and even for us as seasoned veterans, we need each other. We need the support of each other for who's hiring, or I got this great opportunity, but I don't know this answer. I have to put out a report. Anybody can help me. I see it on Facebook nonstop, and I love it. I love seeing the comments of each other wanting to support. So community, we are going to be in a state of community for a while, and I hope it's a positive community.
Roger, we both put on white shirts today. I put on a jacket. We both put on cufflinks. Looks like you trimmed your beard. I trimmed my beard today for you. But neither of us put on ties. And I hate putting on ties. Are ties done?
Yeah, you know what? Normally I would actually be wearing a bow tie. I have quite a nice collection of ties, but I must admit I do love my bow ties. Gregory Allen, one of my favorite bow tie makers here in Toronto as well. But to answer your question, the ties, are they done with? Ties have been going through a gradual decline, for the last decade, more so in the creative community, where it started with casual Fridays. Casual Fridays turned into Monday to Friday, turned into jeans are accepted at the workplace, but look smart, look professional, but still wearing a blazer. Yeah, the tie in that industry was gone a long time ago. Bay Street, banking industry, real estate, surprisingly, it is still that sign of respect. More so, it's not necessarily a fashion statement. It's a sign of respect that you hold the purse and I'm being respectful of my time with you. And in a snapshot, that's always been, my take on the tie, or in an audience, it's a respect to finish off the look as well. Yeah, it's a question I don't have the answer for. Will it come back? I hope so. I love my ties.
If we chat again, we're both going to have to put on our favorite ties.
1,000%.
Roger Gingrich, who is the CEO of the Canadian International Fashion Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, what's the website people can check you out at?
It's CANIFF, CANI for international, FFF.com. So CANIFF.com, and our Instagram at CANIFF_CA.
Real pleasure chatting with you. I've heard such good things about you, and it's kind of fun looking at the wall behind you. I wish I could come and check it out. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night, everybody.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.